This is episode 41 of the Gauntlet podcast. My name is Jason.
This is Rich.
My name is Steve.
And my name is Dan.
Awesome, good. Nice improv on the introductions, guys, because we did not cover the order in which we should go, so that's good. I'm always super impressed by that. I know it's like a very small skill, like there's not much going on there, but I maintain it's impressive. Let's talk about a game that we've each played in the last week. Let's see, Steve, what have you been playing?
I've been playing several things, but I think the one thing I'm just in love with lately is Codenames. And Codenames is a little board/card game called Codenames. Excuse me. By is where I was trying to go. Czech designer Vlada Chvatil, and I'm absolutely pronouncing that wrong. But he's designed things like Galaxy Trucker and Dungeon Pets and all sorts of fun things.
Is this the game we played at Christmas?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. All right.
So Codenames basically involves two teams, each of which has a spy master. And the theme, which is a very light drizzle on top of the mechanics, is that the spy masters are trying to get their spy cohorts to identify friendly agents or something. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Each spy master takes a look at the same secret coded tile, which tells them which words out of a grid of 25 that everyone can see are secretly red team words, secretly blue team words, or other things. And so, as the spy master, what you're trying to do is take these separate, unrelated words and connect them via, on your turn, you try and connect them via one word, and a one-word hint. So, if you're trying to go for, say, if you've got two cards that are both red cards, say horse and mount, right? You might say saddle. Because that's that's a thing that those two might have in common. You can relate those, right? So you say saddle and then the number of cards that you're trying to relate. So saddle 2. Hopefully your teammates will figure that out, and hopefully you didn't miss the fact that, donkey or something like that is one of the other team's words, right? Assuming they choose one of the words correctly, they can keep choosing. If they choose the second one correctly, hooray, you have 2 points. If they choose what's called an innocent bystander card, your turn's over, goes to the other team. If they choose one of the other team's cards, they get a point, your turn's over. And then there's one card that is the Black Assassin card. If your teammates choose that, your game is over and you have lost. It's a very simple premise from which you get a ton of fun. You get a real feeling of accomplishment when you string together 3 or 4 related words and your teammates can start to pick them out. And from the other side, when you pick those things out, when somebody says baseball 3, and you're like, oh yeah, I got it, field, round, and mound, or something like that, then you feel accomplished. But what I really love is that there are some unexpected, I guess, types of fun you can get from it. And one of those is that I think this is just sort of a thing with Vlada games. You have to take some pleasure in the huge screw-ups, because they're probably going to be inevitable. I think in the first game we played over.
Oh yeah, we had one at Krampusnacht. What was the great screw up in that one? It was so good. I've been racking my brain trying to remember it the whole time you've been talking.
It's Pole Revere.
Yes,
Pole Revere. That's right. Yeah.
Somebody was trying to link, I think, revolution and figure, like revolutionary figure, by saying revere, right? And then Jason, I think you suggested, just as a joke, clearly. Oh hey, you know what, you guys? You know what other team? I bet it's that one down there that says Pole Revere, right? Right, guys? Right? And it was late enough, and they were tired enough or drunk enough that they went along with that, and they're like, yeah, Pole Revere, we got this.
Was Pole was like an option, right? It was
yes,
is that what it was? Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So it was like Pole Revere, right? Yeah.
Which would have been against the rules anyway if they'd been doing that. You can't go for sound alike type things, but my favorite bits are when people either screw up, or another thing, like when you're the spy master, you're supposed to be stone-faced, like you give no hints to your team, even as they are selecting words, and even as they are talking and speaking nonsense and guessing completely wrong because they're idiots. You remain stone-faced. And so what I really love is, as your friends who know you well, just in front of you, discuss how stupid they think you might or might not be, right? So, like, at one point, I say baseball 2. And then my friends, as I'm just sitting there not reacting, talk about, yeah, does Steve think that, okay, one of these words is mount. Does Steve think that a pitcher sits on a mount? A pitcher's mount? Steve doesn't know a lot about sports, does he? No, he doesn't. He doesn't. That's a peculiar pleasure I haven't experienced in any other game. Codenames is like $20, and there's like 200 cards in it. Each of them's reversible. It's a different word on the other side. There's so much replayability, and you can't go wrong for the price. It's a really great game.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. What do we call this genre of card game and board game? Because this is a thing, right? Like, lately, a lot of board games and card games have had mechanics kind of similar to this, where one person has, like, information and they're trying to convey just enough, like, you know, like trying to convey a clue that lets you have just enough information to make the right choice without guessing too much, you know? Like, what is, like Dixit kind of started it, I feel like.
Yeah.
But
I think Spyfall is sort of like that, too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's Codenames, Dixit, Spyfall, Mysterium is that way to, you know, like, this is a thing. But I want like a tidy thing to call that genre of game, and I don't know what it is. But
I'm sure Board Game Geek has tags for it, but I don't know
doubt.
what.
Yeah, no doubt. Awesome.
How
is there
about
anything else you want to say?
deduction,
Codenames?
Party game, spies / secret agents, or word game?
Deduction. I think deduction is
Yeah.
probably what we're looking for, but yeah. But that could also include like Clue.
Right, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to say about Codenames, Steve?
Yeah, not necessarily. It's awesome. No, I lied. I'm sorry. Hold on. One of the spectacular screw ups that I really loved. It's a very different game depending on which side of the depending on whether you're the spy master or not. And so the first time my friend Jay was the spy master, after playing a game where where I was the spy master, he sat there for like 5 minutes trying to come up with his clue. And I totally understand, because the first time you play that, it can be a brain bender, right? And so he sat there for genuinely about 5 minutes, right? Just contemplating and trying to come up with something. Finally, he gets this smile on his face, and he goes, "Oh yeah. Steve, you ready for this?" I'm like, "Yeah. You ready? You better be ready." I'm like, "I'm ready." And he goes, hold on, pause. So one of the rules of the game is your clue absolutely cannot involve any word on one of the cards or any part of any of the words on the cards. So if it's baseball, you can't say baseball, you can't say base, you can't say ball, right? 5 minute lead up, Jay's like, all right, here we go. Washington, 2. And of course, about 6 inches from where he's sitting is a card that says Washington. And just turn over, free point for the other team. Way to go. And that's how Codenames goes.
Awesome. Cool. I guess I will go next. The game that I want to talk about is Ghost Lines. Ghost Lines is by John Harper. It is a PBTA game that is powered by the Apocalypse game, in which you play line bulls, and these are gentlemen and women who are on these trains, who are capturing and destroying ghosts that are getting on these trains. Okay. It's a part of John Harper's, it's the same world that Blades in the Dark and some of his other games are set in. And, the aesthetic is kind of, not quite steampunk. It's more like whale punk, I think is what we've landed on calling it. It's, the characters are real, like there's just a single playbook. It doesn't have multiple playbooks. The rules are on four sheets of paper, or 2 sheets of paper front and back, I should say. Pretty straightforward, a very, very simple implementation of the Apocalypse World, engine. And I put it on the calendar for 3 sessions, basically just to kind of round out January. I didn't have a lot of expectation that it was going to be more than just like a 3-session trifle, you know? I was like, this is going to be a thing that we're going to get, we're going to put on here just to kind of round out January. And then in February, we're going to start the for real games or whatever, right? That was kind of my thinking on it. But I have to say, we just finished it up. I was super impressed with how deep it got and how fleshed out the characters became, and just kind of the different directions that our story went in. I didn't see it coming, frankly, but I was delighted, and I want to play it again. Now it's not calendared. It won't be calendared until, maybe in a couple months, but I didn't anticipate we would be doing it again. So, but I was very, very impressed with how we were able to take this very, extremely light, mechanical framework of a game and turn it into like quite an interesting, character-driven story. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was just our group. I don't know if it was like Ghost Lines doing that or what, but, Rich, you were in that one. What'd you think about it?
I agree. It was probably a combination of group and rules. There were some rules that I like how you interpreted them because it's a 4-page thing. There's a 1-page character sheet and then 1 page worth of kind of rules. The mix that I liked the most was how it was almost a half and half game. Like an A plot and a B plot on a TV show, and we would have working the line, and sometimes the A plot working the line with sometimes the B plot, and we were handling the in between stuff as well. You worked in some kind of political stuff, some relationship oriented stuff. It was really great. I think that you helped bring to light a lot of the rumor pieces that are there in very just sketchy detail, and gave us something to play with other than, okay, here's the ghost, go do the thing.
Yeah, I was happy with it. Whenever we've run Ghost Lines in the past, it's only ever been as a one shot. I don't think we've ever done it in more than one session. And so we'd have the rumors hanging out there, So one of the things that happens in the game, just so listeners understand, is after your line bulls have worked a line on the train, they go to a city that the train ends up in, and then they do side jobs and they work, they do side jobs, they get extra ghost work, they hear rumors about things, that sort of thing. And when you run it in a one shot, that usually just gets like kind of forgotten. Like, there's no reason to really explore it because you're just doing a one shot, right? But this was fun because in the interim, between the sessions, I was able to take those rumors and those sort of like little extra bits kind of floating out in the setting and kind of reincorporate them into the character's story. And I liked how it worked. And I liked that the game gave me the freedom to do it. It was, because like you said, because the rules are kind of sketchy, you have to fill in a lot of the gaps. And, but I enjoyed it. I really quite enjoyed it. And I enjoyed, just kind of coming up with fun characterizations on the NPCs. And I always enjoy, in the Saturday morning crowd, I always enjoy like just the sort of basic interactions between the players. I think the Saturday morning crowd is particularly good at that, as far as the gauntlet goes. So yeah, it's a good time. Ghost Lines.
I think Yoshi's the secret sauce, though, really.
He might be, yeah. Yoshi's pretty, yeah. Yoshi's always like the heart. You ever notice that, Rich? He's always like the...
He is. He's our fulcrum.
So is that like a Captain Planet thing? Like everybody else has the cool elements and he got heart?
He got heart, exactly. But he gets a monkey as well.
That's true.
So, yeah.
Who has the green mullet? Who's that person?
I think that has to be the GM, right? But
I think so, yeah.
Either that or I'm just that fat pig one. I don't know. That's one of the villains. I don't remember the names of the villains, but they were all like tar sludge and, trash fire.
You already expanded past my lore of
Captain Planet. Awesome. I don't have anything else to say about it though. Rich, you want to go next?
You bet. I'm going to talk about Monsterhearts. I mentioned this before, but I'm in an early phase of a campaign we're calling Paramount because that's where it's set. And I'm really loving this group. They posted on the Google Plus community. I didn't know any of them coming in, and they've been really open and friendly. I love how much material they had ready. So they stole and borrowed a whole lot of stuff from other Monsterhearts games that they've played and seen. Epistolary Richard, who is the community leader for Monsterhearts on Google Plus, he had evidently played with them before, and they pulled a lot of the material for city creation and school notes, which has always been a really free-form kind of thing for me, and they had a nice little process, and that was really fun going through. But as we've gone through, a couple of things that are different from any Monsterhearts thing that I've played. First one is that they've decided to take, Ross Coleman has the set of Monsterhearts variant rules for the basic moves called the Krabby. Yeah, the Krabby rules. We've taken a few of the Krabby rules and mixed them with some of the basic moves to come up with our own little hybrid. And that's been fun playing with that because, it gives you some different options from, a tactical or just from a reactionary perspective, how to react to the way that moves work slightly differently. And then, and I don't know if they will probably say they stole this as well. They're very humble. But the Paramount folks have rules for using, we're playing in Hangout, right? So you can use the chat window, the text chat window that exists in Hangout to simulate text messages or Snapchat, what have you, between the player characters that are involved or aren't involved in the scene. So it's kind of always on. And they even have rules where, if you want, you can turn somebody on via text message, like send them a little Snapchat or.
No, that's good.
You can shut them down. And so it's great because, in a lot of gaming at the table, you really need the GM's attention, but this is a whole different kind of media or avenue to continue play. And I've used that before in Monsterhearts, but it never had rules attached. It was always just kind of ephemera. And
I remember you guys, when we first started Monsterhearts, for like the first 2 sessions, maybe, you guys were doing that in the window. And I could only enjoy it like after the fact as the MC because I couldn't really pay attention to that and also run the game. But I always liked it theoretically, though.
And having some rules thrown into it is pretty amusing. I got it used, quote unquote, against me in the last game, which was great. And then the group's very open to feedback. The mixture of crabby and basic rules all came from conversation after the first game where we did a Roses and Thorns where you kind of talk about what was something you liked about the game, what's something you'd like to see different. So it's not just, hey, if, you feel good, you feel bad. It's more, hey, how can we adjust this? How can we improve this? And they're very proactive. It's great. It's really
I like that they've taken the Monster Heart rules and some of the resources that are available and made it the game that works best for them, Mm-hmm. I find that lately, maybe like in the last 4 or 5 months at least, I find myself like really, really feeling somewhat oppressed by this very story gamer notion of we must play the rules this way, right? Like the rules are meant to be played this way, and if you don't play the rules this way, then you're not doing the game any justice, and you're not going to get the right outcomes, right? And that's something I've preached myself a lot, right? But lately, I have to say, I'm kind of coming around to this idea that like you should be able to adjust them to fit your group's style and play culture, right? I don't think that's true of every game, but I think it's particularly something that maybe Apocalypse World games are good for. So, but just a little diversion there.
No, it's a good note. I have similar feels. I think you should play rules as written until you get the game, but once you get the game, it's your game. Do what you want.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's where I've landed too. Yeah.
You mentioned these crabby rules. Did you? And then I thought you said something about out of the book. Are they like alternate rules in the Monsterhearts book? It's been a while since I read
They're
them.
not in the book. No, Ross Coman published the crabby rules. I could probably find it. I'm sure it's in many different places. There's even discussion about it on the Monsterhearts Google Plus community about why it doesn't work and some people who laud it. It gives a lot of different options for how the basic moves work in Monsterhearts.
Okay. All right, cool.
Is there anything else you want to say about it, Rich, before we move on?
No, just big ups to the Paramount group.
Cool. Dan, are you going to talk about Dungeon World for real, Dan? Is that really a thing?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I feel like...
Are we entering like a time-space continuum thing right now?
No, this is like the walk of shame for me because I didn't get a chance to play many games, and so the only one that I can actually talk about is Dungeon World, and so it's like...
You got to play Dungeon World and my half-baked game.
Right, so I know. So like, you guys like Dan, caught me slumming playing Dungeon World.
Are you being held hostage? Blink twice for yes.
I hadn't set out to play Dungeon World, but just the way that like we had a couple cancellations, and so we didn't get to split the tables the same way we had intended initially, and so it was Dungeon World or nothing, man. So sometimes you just got to do it. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like we may have mentioned a little bit about Dungeon World in the past, so I might not go into too much detail about it.
Yeah, I hear there may be a podcast.
Yeah,
that
I think other podcasts covered Dungeon World pretty well,
yeah.
So I don't think we need to like belabor it. But I will say that I played like I went all in, and I was like, all right, man, this is it. Let's do some fantasy bullshit. And so I was a halfling thief named Trixie, and I spoke with a Cockney accent the times that I could be bothered to remember to speak with a Cockney accent. And I was probably pretty insufferable, but Scott was very nice about not calling me out on all of my bullshit. So that's it, basically.
The last time I played Dungeon World with you, you did something similar where you weren't a halfling Cockney named Trixie, or a Cockney halfling named Trixie, but you played a bard, and as I recall, all of your songs were like just fantasy spins on like hair metal band songs or something.
Yeah,
like,
more or less. They were all just fantasy puns from like pop music.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, it was, and I think everyone at the table was like kind of like, eye rolling or whatever.
Oh, you
but
fuckers
I
laughed. Don't even try.
I laughed. No, I laughed as well. But that's because I understand your sense of humor and where you were coming from. But it's my job to get it.
Well, good job.
So.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say about Dungeon World?
No, I think if you want to hear about Dungeon World, there's a podcast called Discern Realities that's pretty good.
Oh, yeah, the new episode's really good, by the way. So, throw that out there. I listened to it today. All right, let's move to the next segment. Our next segment is Giving Me Life. Rich, what's giving you life?
Well, what's giving me life right now is that I am putting to bed a very fun play-by-post game of Apocalypse World. Not the one that I'm running for Gauntlet, folks. I've been running one called Fury. It's been running for, I want to say, about 7-8 months. We got
yeah. I've heard this mentioned on other podcasts.
Yes,
actually.
well, I decided that it felt like it was time to kind of write it off into the sunset, and so we had a few more scenes to wrap things up. And the thing that's giving me life is the epilogues. Now, this is something I've done for a few games, and I think the first time it happened was in a live game. It was a thing where I was at a Games on Demand. They're like, okay, now we only have 5 minutes left. Tell me the epilogue. What is the thing that happens at the end and when the credits are rolling? And doing that when people have some moments to really reflect and write up what's the last scene we see for this character. It's a real challenge for people because it's wide open and it's play-by-post, so there's no time pressure like there can be in a live face-to-face game. So epilogues, I always get a little nervous. I try to frame it with just like a loose amount of a couple questions that are still out there to maybe give a prompt. But then I have to sit and wait, right? I have to wait because at this point, Rich is no longer the MC. It's really all on them to put it to bed. And then, because we have a chat going, it's been so exciting when someone will go, okay, mine's up. And then we read their little epilogue and it's like a few paragraphs like, oh, wow, that's great. Yeah, we put that to bed. Or, oh, I didn't see this coming out. Or, oh, that's definitely a through line for your whole character. And then someone will take that and they'll incorporate a little bit of that first person's epilogue and they'll add some of their own stuff. And watching everybody, we're down to just one more player has to post an epilogue and the thing's kind of completely done. And it's been a really fun experience. Some great players and some really interesting, mostly misty-eyed reading of epilogues as they bring. It's sad. It's sad. There was one character who died.
Did they kill themselves in the epilogue?
Yes, it was basically a passing of the torch to his protege that he kind of brought along early on, and it was kind of the end result of him coming from being all by himself to seeing all the things that they had kind of grown and become a family together. And so it was pretty awesome.
Cool. Awesome. Steve, what's giving you life?
So this week, what's giving me life is a Netflix documentary series called Making a Murderer. And Making a Murderer...
I love it. It's so good. Oh, man. Just want to throw that in there.
Okay,
I'm
good. I was going to specifically recommend it to you because of how much you were involved in the first season of Serial. And there's a lot of parallels here. There's a lot of the same ups and downs. I know what's going on. Oh, I had no idea what was going on. That sort of thing. And it's about a man who was falsely accused and falsely imprisoned for 18 years for a crime he didn't commit. And then when he gets back home to his hometown where he grew up, he is suddenly the lead suspect in a horrible murder. I'm only about halfway through, so I'm glad you said that because I don't want to. Yeah, yes,
I'm glad you said that.
I want to know. I want to know nothing. It's a bizarre feeling because there's such entertainment value in the way they put the series together, but it's about real life, terrible things. And so I feel really engaged and really kind of terrible about how engaged I am. it was a struggle to go to bed when I went to bed last night because it was just it's such a big reveal at the end of an episode, right? But it's really well done. It's really compelling, and it's one of the things that makes you feel a little dirty about our justice system.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah, and about humanity in general, and makes you want more of it. Highly recommended. Yeah, Netflix instant. What's it called again? Making a Murderer. There we go.
That show so resonated with me because in my professional work, which I almost never talk about on the podcast, but my professional work, a big part of it in the past especially has been dealing with like police overreach, right? Like police brutality and basically just misconduct by local law enforcement, right? That's kind of my thing. I personally have I really, really like bad feelings about police officers. Not all police officers, but just like the ones, like even the good police officers tend to protect the bad ones, and that's what bothers me, right?
Yeah.
But that show is great. It's so good. And the one thing about that show that really stuck with me, I guess, is apart from just like the basic, like kind of, crime drama, sort of like procedural aspect of it, right? Is the way it deals with class. Like class is a big part of the show.
Yeah.
Like social class. And how like this family is perceived in their community and how that perception, cause they're quite like, socioeconomically speaking, like very, very like uneducated and really, and not well liked in the community. But they seem like, normal, nice people, but they get perceived a certain way just because they're poor, and that part of the show also like really, really like stuck with me in a way that, I found very challenging and, difficult, but still very compelling. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I gotta be honest. There are, Steve Avery, who's the sort of focal point, the man falsely accused. His family, I look at them and I'm like, oh man, I got a family like that. That's
oh yeah, me too. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I do too. And yeah, it definitely like you feel like ooh, and like you get so like I can't speak for you, Steve, but like I've gotten so far removed from that like part of my family, like just in terms of like my education and my household income and all that stuff, right? And stuff like this though, like really brings you back, where it's like, oh, but yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry, Rich and Dan, have you guys seen this show by chance?
No, I haven't. I've heard good things though.
You should go check it out. It's good. Yeah, it's really solid.
I've heard that it's better than Serial season 2. So
Serial season 2 is not great. So I mean, it's okay, but it's not.
Compared to season 1,
it doesn't have the magic. Of
it's not the
1.
Same. Yeah, it's definitely not the same.
This is my wife's catnip. I'll just watch New Girl Things.
Hey, that's my wife's catnip. She's watching it right now in the other room, actually.
Nice.
Dan. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say again. That's Making a Murderer. I have to look it up because I keep wanting to call it How to Train Your Murderer, and that's not right.
You should also watch. If you have access to HBO, Steve, there's one called The Jinx, which came out a couple years ago. Very similar. The Jinx. It's really, really good.
JINX.
JINX. Yep.
Okay.
Quite awesome. Cool. Dan, what's giving you life?
I don't know that this is entirely, giving me life, but this is going to be my last podcast episode as a full-time
what
host. Yeah. Sorry, I should have told you before now, I guess. But
yeah, you probably ought to spring it on me like that.
But like just in general, things like in the real world are like pressing on my time, and I have to claw back some time from somewhere. And the Gauntlet is basically my like the sink for most of my free time. Short of cutting other games, though, there's nothing else to cut. Basically, I'm going to be like signing off of the podcast after this episode. But, it kind of made me think about like our history on the podcast. And, it hasn't been that long, but it's been a year, which is about, I don't know, probably 10 months longer than I had reasonable expectations that it would go when we started it. So, and like, it's turned into something that I'm actually really proud of. And like, I'm really happy that I got to like be a part of it for this long, and that it's turned into this thing that is like so much bigger than, me and Jason recording a show in my office for like a dozen people. So, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to say other than like it's been awesome, and like I don't know, everything about it has been so cool, and I'm really sorry to like I'm sad to have to see it go, but I have like every confidence that you guys will continue to bring it, and that it's in really good hands. I've just been like the midwife birthing this podcast and sending it off into the world, and now
that's a terrible analogy.
No, it's cool, man. I've like slapped it on the ass and it started crying, and now I'm just handing it off to Rich, I guess. I don't know. Who's gonna take this fucking baby? That's what I want to know.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Is that why I'm all covered in blood?
It all makes sense now. Obviously, we're bummed out about that. Nobody wants to see you go.
Yeah.
When I heard about it, we've known about it for a while. As the day of this recording, we've known about it for, a little over a week. But, initially it was, really, really like, oh my fucking God, why are you doing this? But I'm gradually processing it and coming to terms with it. I'm delighted to say that Steve will be taking your place, as far as, regular co-host duties, which is awesome. I'm very happy about that.
Which was awesome because as Steve was like our first actual like third co-host. So like, here from the beginning with us.
I think it was the right move. And so my Giving Me Life is not really giving me life at all, but I do want to kind of piggyback off what, off yours, Dan, which is to say, I think when we started the podcast, it was just basically it was Dan and I's vision. I mean, we had a lot of input from our face-to-face Houston group, but ultimately, like, Dan and I were making the decisions about what, the form that it kind of finally took, right? And there was some shifting and changing around as it went, but we kind of landed on a thing that worked for us. And I think, actually, I've been trying to find the positive in Dan leaving, apart from having Steve come on, which I'm delighted about. I think one thing to maybe consider, the three of us, meaning Steve and Rich and myself, is, now that maybe we have an opportunity to kind of like assess the podcast and figure out where we want it to go, and maybe make it, no longer just Dan and I's vision, but like Dan and Rich and Steve's. Or I'm sorry, Jason and Rich and Steve's.
Are you leaving too?
I'm still going to insert my vision.
What?
I think there's an opportunity. No, I mean this. I think there's an opportunity for Rich and Steve and myself to change the podcast in a way that makes sense for the three of us, right? Especially because the nature of the Gauntlet community has changed a lot since we first started the podcast. Like, there's been a huge, huge change in that year. And so I think that I think the show is probably needed to be kind of retooled a little bit and reformatted. And so I'm going to take the Dan leaving as like an opportunity to kind of do that and to give Steve and Rich like more ownership over the show. So that's a good thing. That's something I'm excited about. In the meantime, I don't think that's going to be right away. I think we probably won't have that all sorted until March. But in the meantime, we've got a bunch of like RPG designer guests coming on in February to kind of like help. Basically we've got to get Steve kind of ready to take over like on the editing end of things. And I don't want to just like have a sharp like change in the format. And so we've got like a month basically to kind of, we're going to kind of buffer with some RPG designers. We've got some awesome people coming on. Hannah Schaefer, Meg Baker, Mark Diaz-Truman. And then I think in March though, I feel like maybe the Gauntlet podcast is going to look a little different. Hopefully it'll be better, right? But we'll see. So
there's no hopefully. It will definitely be better.
It will definitely be better. Yeah. I think this is something that people will know about.
You guys know Dan can still hear us, right?
I know.
No, it's better because we have Steve, and we didn't always have Steve before. See, there you go.
There's that. And also, I really truly think that the nature of the podcast has to change because the nature of the community has changed. And I think there's a way to better serve that community, I think, than maybe when we first put the show together. So we'll be talking about that. But in the meantime, we've got awesome guests coming on in the next month. And that's all I've got. So why don't we go to the next segment? I don't want to continue thinking about Dan not being on the show. So let's go.
Sounds good.
All right. For our main topic today, we want to discuss something that happens every now and then that people have to deal with, and I think might be worth talking about here. Prepping a one-shot. And here's what we mean by that. This is a circumstance in which you're playing a game that is normally played out over multiple sessions, but in this instance, you have to run it as a one-shot. Perhaps it's a convention. Perhaps you are just doing a demo at a game store or something like that, right? And so we thought it might be nice to talk about just, some best practices for making sure that your one-shotted version of an otherwise campaign-length game goes off well. What are we talking about here? Like, in terms of games here? Like, what games are we talking about? What games are we not talking about? I think that's an important distinction.
So we're not talking about a game that was built to start and finish within one session, like a Fiasco, or most of the indie games that seem to come out nowadays. You're talking about something that was built for multi-session play, like something from maybe Apocalypse World, or your favorite Dungeon World, or maybe even the more conventional style games that are built for longer term play. Even Burning Wheel is an example of a game that we're going to try to one-shot here, right?
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Apocalypse World and its derivatives, or not derivatives, but its spawn, I guess. Apocalypse World is the midwife that yanked all those games out of...
It really is, yeah. That's a good
Somebody-
analogy.
We're back to the baby again.
Is that why all my games are bloody?
That's why it's soaked in blood whenever you pull it off your shelf. Yeah, you're right. I'm glad you mentioned Apocalypse World and PBTA stuff, because those are also, you have to handle those differently for one shots as well, right? Like, even though that they're normally like kind of shorter series games, like maybe 5 or 6 sessions, they still have to be handled differently, in my opinion, if you're going to just one shot them. So yeah, and obviously definitely like, more traditional stuff like your D&Ds, your Pathfinders, that kind of thing. Burning Wheel is a really interesting example, and I think we should talk about it specifically. But so let's just go around the table. Like, what do you guys think are like the key things to make sure you're doing when you're prepping a longer term game for a one shot? Because I do think there are some real key things you need to make sure you hit. Rich, do you want to start?
One of the things that I do when I've committed to one shot a game is a lot of times I try to encapsulate, like, I'll bullet point out, what are the meaty parts of this game from a mechanical perspective? What are the aspects of play that really highlight this game? What's the best part of a Shadowrun game? What's the best part of Apocalypse World? Well, for me, it's first session, but for most everybody else, it's not. So you got to get past all the following people around and maybe have a little bit of a plot. So what are the pieces of the game that you definitely want to make sure someone gets a chance to experience? Even if maybe in a one shot, you have to bend over a little bit to make sure you can get there.
I'm with you on that. When I run, the game I always end up one-shotting is Dungeon World, right? When I'm at a convention.
Wait, what?
Well, I mean,
Tell us more about this Dungeon World.
I know. Well, so there's this midwife or something. I don't know. I'm getting my stories confused. No, like when I run games at conventions, that's what I run, right? I run Dungeon World. Or if I've had people even just straight up ask me like, hey, will you show us how to play this, right? Will you demo it for us? And whenever I do that, I do that exact thing you've just said, Rich. I kind of avoid all of that normal first session getting to know you stuff, In fact, I don't concern myself with like much backstory or character development at all in a one shot of Dungeon World. I just have a dungeon ready to go. That fucker's got 4 rooms in it. There's a dragon at the end, and then they go, like that's basically it, right? Because to my mind, that's what I want them to experience in the game, right? I want them to experience exploring these rooms. I want them to experience how the combat works. I want them to experience like the interplay between Discern Realities and Spout Lore and all that stuff. I'm not as interested in some of these like other things in Dungeon World that are great in context of a longer, the context of a longer game or, longer campaign. But, I want them just to get the good stuff, right? The action, the narrative action, the flow. And then I want them to get through all those, I want them to get to something like a big bad at the end. That's what I want, it's like playing like a really good level of a video game. That's what I try to deliver when I'm doing that. So I'm with you on that for sure.
So Jason,
yeah.
What happens if your time's running out and they're not at the big bad at the end?
Well, so that's a great question, Dan. I think it's okay, and this is not just for like fantasy stuff. You can do this in any game, right? I think it's okay to fast forward, right? So like you say, we've gotten to a certain point. I know we've got about 30 or 40 minutes left, and there's like a big set piece or a big monster or a big thing at the end or something that we've been kind of driving toward that I want the players to see so they have some conclusion, I'll just fast forward that sucker. I'll say, you know what I would normally do here is we'd have a scene doing this and a scene doing this, but just for sake of you guys, having some closure here, let's just like fast forward to the end and see how that fight looks. Or let's fast forward to the end and encounter, Mr. Jones, who you think has been, burying bodies, in the back of his house or whatever, right? Like let's go, that classic setup, that classic, final encounter. Let's go do that, right? Because I think what it all boils down to is, which was kind of what not quite what Rich was getting at, but I think what I'd like to sort of pivot into is, as best you can, I think you should try to have like a complete story for that session, right? You need to have like a complete story. Like I don't think it's fair or as satisfying to like let the players just feel like a transient thing. Like, oh, my characters are here for a minute and who the hell knows where they come from and who knows where they're going. But we're going to play for 3 hours and then we're done, I think as best you can kind of give them like a complete story in one session, you should do it. But Steve, do you have any thoughts on prepping a one shot?
Yes, but first some clarification. When you say you should have a complete story, what you mean is by the end of the session, you want the story to have, an ending. Not necessarily you go in with, here are the hoops you jump through or whatever in order to achieve my story.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it depends, right? But I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're trying to make sure that in this one shot you have like something of a complete story arc, there are things you can do that are not necessarily like railroady. It's like you don't have to railroad them, but even though my four dungeon rooms and a dragon is basically a railroad, but like, say like in Monsterhearts, for example, what you can do instead of, like saying, like having a pre-plotted out, list of occurrences, what you can do instead is just have a really heavy frame on the session, right? So normally when we first start playing Monsterhearts, like Rich alluded to, you follow the characters around, you ask lots of questions, and that can take up a whole session, right? And you're not gonna, it'll be interesting, it's always fun, and that might be actually what you want to show off in Monsterhearts, in which case you do it. But if you're angling for like to complete like a little story arc, it's maybe not the best thing to do because you're not gonna get that. You're just gonna get like, oh, here's some cool characters, now we're done. Instead, what I think you can do is you can start with like a real heavy frame, like, really, really aggressively frame up the circumstances that the characters find themselves in, right? Like put them right in the middle of the action and start like right in the middle of things, and then let them work their way out, right? Let them work their way out of the situation organically and naturally, but you've kind of put them in the situation, right? So you're almost guaranteed to have like a story arc resolved, right?
I think so long as shortly after character creation, you have a really strong, charged situation for the characters to go into, you're on pretty good footing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see. Dan, do you have any thoughts on this? Or did you just have questions today?
I feel like we've covered everything. I mostly just have questions. I'm here to learn, Jason.
Okay, very good. I
run games that are designed to be one-shotted, so...
Let's talk about the rules. Rich kind of alluded to it a little bit when he was saying, like, wanting to show like a particular slice of a game. How do we feel about like the rules? And like, let's go to Burning Wheel, right? Burning Wheel has all of those subsystems, right? They've got all those like real discrete subsystems. It would be really impractical to try to do all of those things at once, right? Rich, what do you think about the rules in a one shot? Like, what should be your goal there?
I think that within a heavy frame, you can build towards or lean really hard into those rules. If I were to do a Burning Wheel, which I would never do because that game gives me fits because I'm not an accountant.
No one should ever play Burning Wheel. That's just throw that out there.
What? No, that's not true.
I love it.
If Jug Carlman is in the room, you should play Burning Wheel because he'll run it for you and it will be amazing. Just don't run Burning Wheel because it's really hard and I don't like challenges. Anyway.
No, I love Burning Wheel, except I hate it as well. So it's...
It's a harsh mistress. Burning Wheel, to me, I would lean hard into a Duel of Wits, right? Because that's the secret sauce. If you can do beliefs and you can do a Duel of Wits, then you've really hit some of the best things you can in a one shot. There are a lot of things that come out of Burning Wheel in deep play that you're never going to get to in a one shot. Just walk away from it. Don't worry
try.
about
that.
Don't
try.
Yeah, don't even try. You're just going to frustrate yourself.
I want to say Luke even recommends this, right? Like, because there's that sort of intro Burning Wheel adventure that's like meant to be a one shot, and it just deals with one subsystem. I think it's Duel of Wits. It just deals with one subsystem, and
the gift, I think.
The gift, yeah. And he always like says that he's like, you should not try to do everything at once, right? Like, just do this one thing. Yeah. I think that's great advice for any game, right? You should.
And the gift starts off with a very charged situation with characters that want mutually exclusive things out of the events that are happening.
Right. It's a nice way of getting a feel for how the system works, getting a feel for one of its subsystems, and it kind of whets your palate for more. It's what hooked me. I mean, I really wanted to keep playing Burning Wheel after I did the gift, and I did, and I've done my time. And now it's over. And there will be no more. No, so, I mean, yeah, it's, I think there's something to be said for not trying to do all of the rules at once. I think there's a real temptation, especially when you feel passionate about a game. You really want people to see every working part, and you really want them to see why you love it so much. But you're going to be able to convey that message of why you love it so much better if you just show them the one or two things that you love so much, right? And let them let them experience that, and then let it just, let that be the taste,
I do have one more thing.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So I think regarding, players are going to need characters, and I think going into that, how fleshed out you should already have the characters. Are you going full pre-gen? Are you letting the players create their own characters? Very much depends on the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you want to aim for probably, because you've probably got 3 or 4 hours to get this done, right? So you don't want to go over 30 minutes or so in order to get the starting characters. And so if you're going with something like Burning Wheel, then it's probably 98% done, if not 100, right? And if you're going with something like Fate, then maybe you want it about 75% done, but they get to choose their top skill and a couple of aspects or something
smart.
like
Yeah,
that,
it's
right?
smart.
Yeah. And I've seen that sort of thing work really well. Especially with Fate in particular, you'll go into a one-shot and you don't really have to do much work except come up with a couple of aspects. And so long as you're doing it right, you're invested from the get-go. But with something like Dungeon World, you might actually be able to just crank out a character in just a few minutes with some, firm guidance, I guess.
It takes 10 minutes. I mean, yeah, it takes 10 minutes. And
yeah.
I always let the players make their character in a one shot, because I think that, one of the things I'm always trying to convey in a Dungeon World one shot is, look how similar this is to D&D, but different and maybe better, right? Even though I lied to Rich and, on Game Advocates and said that Dungeon World is not better than D&D. I totally lied, in the shrewdest, most diplomatic move I've ever made on the podcast. In fact, I think, what I'm aiming for is, this is a lot like D&D, isn't it? But see how we didn't have to sit here for 30 minutes while we waited on Homeboy while we waited on the initiative to get back to us, right? But in doing that, one of the things I think that's really great is if they get to make their own character. I think that's a part of what I'm trying to convey. I want them to see how quick character creation is, but at the same time, I want them to also look at the options and look at how many options there are, and how it is kind of a little bit more of a media experience than they might have initially suspected. So, but yeah. That's good advice, though. Yeah, it's worth keeping in mind. If you're doing a trad game, you better have pre-gens, right?
Yeah.
Or we do Dan's thing, which may have gotten edited out, so I don't know why I'm mentioning it now, but Dan's thing, where we spend 3/4 of the session making characters, and then we TPK them. So, just fabulous way to run a one shot.
That's why I need to learn. That's why I'm here for advice.
So you're here to ask questions. I know. One thing I want to mention. I love it. This is just for game designers out there, or whoever, I don't know. I love it when game designers give you the tools for running their multi-session game as a one-shot, right? Now Luke did that with Burning Wheel, like we've mentioned. But also the one that I want to give special shout out to is, Jason Morningstar and Night Witches. Night Witches has an awesome one-shot, procedure. It's almost like a whole little separate set of rules in a way. Not quite, but kind of. But basically it's a procedure that lets you advance the characters a little bit, so you get to actually see how the advancement works, and you get to take some of those advancements and understand kind of how they play off each other. And then it kind of puts you right in the middle of the duty stations. There are these 6 duty stations that the Night Witches are at. It puts you right in the middle of one of the most dangerous and interesting ones. So your characters have advanced a little bit. You get to do the awesome duty station, and it's just a great way of one-shotting that game. So big props there.
Yeah, that was really well done. I only played the one session, but it was a one shot, and I loved the setup, because you get to You sort of feel like you're cheating and advancing a little when you shouldn't be. But then it's night witches, so you're also getting screwed over. It was really well done.
Yeah. And all it is it's just a proceduralized, formalized way of doing what we've been talking about, right? I mean, it's no different than what I just suggested, which is like put the characters in the middle of like a heavily framed, like frame the situation up really, really, really aggressively, put them right in the middle of the action and have them work their way out, right? It's the same thing. It's just kind of like a proceduralized way of doing it. And I quite like it. That's good. Awesome. Well, is there anything else we want to say about this topic?
I've got a couple things that I wanted to kind of point
Please
out. Speaking from Powered by the Apocalypse games, one of the pieces of advice I would have for that is if you've got a hard frame in mind, like I learned a lot from running Hatchet City, which is a good little Apocalypse World Kickstarter to jump into a one shot. Think about the playbooks that are on offer. Do they all fit?
Oh, that's good.
Can you run them all? Good. Because there's some where they're great and they sing in a one shot. There are other playbooks that are really built for a longer play. Maybe you just don't offer it. And if somebody asks for it, try to talk them into something.
Yeah, that's
else.
smart. Because you think of like The Chosen in both Monster of the Week and Monsterhearts, right? That's definitely a multi-session skin and playbook, right? It does not sing quite as much in one shot.
Yeah, and The Chosen in Monsterhearts completely, it's all about that.
Yep.
It is now the Buffy game. There are no other ways to make it happen.
That's really good advice. We should probably mention, we've repeated this several times now, like a hard frame or an aggressive frame. We should probably give an example of what we mean by that. I'm sure most listeners have figured it out, but just in case, I'll just use my most recent example of when I did it rather successfully, which was when we played Monsterhearts over Christmas, December. We had like basically what was functionally a one shot. It was a two shot, but it was kind of a one shot because it was a little separated out from the rest of our story. And what I did was we had some new characters and we could have totally justified just doing the follow the characters around thing. But instead what I did was I put them all in the middle of making preparations for the Christmas musical. Right. And that's all it means. It just means like you, instead of just like letting them wander, like following the characters around, letting them wander, you just put them in a situation. Right. And see how they respond to it. And that was kind of what we did. I said, you know what? This is going to be about the Christmas musical. We're still going to basically just kind of watch you guys and I'm going to ask you lots of questions about what you're doing. But this is what we're doing, like in terms of this story, like the story is this Christmas musical. So, but yeah. You said you had something else you wanted to say, Rich?
I do. The thing that I would suggest is plan to end 15 or 20 minutes early. Just plan on it because there are a couple things that will happen. As you play, either people are going to be really involved in the story and then you can do that epilogues thing that I mentioned earlier. But I would plan for it because that's where you could maybe do a little Q&A or you could reveal behind the curtain, hey, this was a taste of this game. You guys didn't get a chance to do this thing. Let me talk to you real quick about these other pieces that we didn't get to in the game that are really interesting mechanical parts of this particular RPG.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. The epilogues thing is good too, right? I mean, talking about like giving them like a satisfying conclusion. You know what? If you don't make it to the dragon or if you don't make it to Farmer Joe and his bodies in the backyard. I don't know what game that's from, by the way. It's just like, I want to play it though. If you don't make it to that, you can do epilogues, right? And just say, hey, let's just go around the table and tell me about, where'd your character end up? What happened to your character at the end of all this? So just one way of doing it. Cool. That was a surprisingly good conversation. Not that I doubted the three of you, but just,
I kind of thought Dan would just, he wouldn't be very helpful because he's all angry now. He's like the short-term.
No, he's got senioritis.
Exactly.
Senioritis.
Yeah. But see, I played the valuable role of audience surrogate in this episode. So.
That's good. You did. Yeah. You asked a question. It's good.
I was relatable, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, so explain it to me, the audience.
Good. All right, well, that was our show, listeners. If you want to get in touch with us, you should join our G Plus community. Go to Google Plus and go to the community section of Google Plus and search for The Gauntlet. You will find us there. You will also there find a link to our meetup group where we organize our online games. It's called Gauntlet Hangouts. We currently have, 100, 200 games on there. It's a bunch. like 48 or 50 is a bunch. There's so many games on there. Many of them are full, but there are still spots available. So if you want to join us for a game, we have lots of cool people running games. Go do that. We're on Twitter at Gauntlet RPG. That hasn't really taken off yet. I don't know how to do it. Is the problem?
How often do you tweet?
Like once every 2 weeks. I don't think it's
that
enough.
That might be your problem.
I think it's the problem. Yeah. I'm not good at Twitter. I may need to give Twitter over to somebody else in the Gauntlet because I'm not good at it. But in any case, at Gauntlet RPG.
We've really made it when like the Gauntlet has a like social media person.
All I know is
you really need one of those.
There's some trifling ass people on Twitter who have way more followers than us, and it's not acceptable. So it's not acceptable. So we need to figure that out. I may need to have a Twitter czar or something. I don't know. And then if you could go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review, even if you don't think we deserve 5 stars, just go do that because it helps, because you might think we deserve 4 stars, but 4 stars aren't as helpful as 5 stars. So go leave a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show, even people who are not using iTunes, because other podcast apps use iTunes metadata, for aggregation and collation and assimilation. So you will want to, if you want to help us out, you'll go do that. Earlier last year, we had a contest. Or not a contest, but we remember when we offered to do funny voices for people if they.
We did, yeah. Bring that back.
We should.
Oh god! Oh god! Dan's trying to sabotage as he leaves.
Rich and Steve, remember that podcast retool I was talking about? I think we might go back to reading 5-star reviews and funny voices.
I think we need to take this to
committee. Anyway, this was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Dan. I wanted to make you do some Trixie impressions.
Oh yeah, I want to hear Trixie. Do Trixie.
Oh, I mean, it's just, lots of, "Oi, governor, there's a trap over there." Stuff like that. That sort of sounded a little bit more Australian than I think it did in the moment.
That was a bit Australian.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah.
The best.
She was Trixie Irwin, actually. So, half Cockney, half Australian.
Were you killed by a dire stingray?
Oh, nice. Too soon, Jason.
Too soon. I know. Too soon. It was like 18 years ago or something. What are you talking about?
The crocodile hunter is a national treasure, man.
Australia's national treasure, not ours.
A global treasure, then.